r/AskReddit. What's the worst coworker you've ever worked with? My coworker likes to initiate conversations, then does long pauses where you go to say something back, then he cuts you off and keeps talking. He has entire conversations almost entirely by himself. He also likes to make changes to my paperwork before it's turned in. Ends up riddled with spelling mistakes while he tries to make the content look smarter. Fortunately, it's all electronically stamped with who made revisions. Fast food. Third shift. The only other employee stayed in the bathroom doing blow. Reply. How TF do you afford Coke on a fast food paycheck? Context. I work in a hospital as a nurse's aide and my department focuses on transporting patients around the facility for tests and room changes. I work night shift and this person started their shift at 6 a.m. There was this lady I worked with that just had the nastiest attitude. Normally I can get along with most folks, but this person just brought the whole room down with negative vibes. Nothing was ever good and she always had bad shifts. One thing she did that upset a lot of people was take patients down for x-rays and leave them down there to return to our office. The big thing to remember here is that even the lengthiest x-rays take maybe 10 minutes at the very most, 2 to 5 minutes on average for the scans. Every morning we got x-rays to do and I had to send her back down to return patients to their rooms after the x-ray technicians called right as she got back to our office. The instances of leaving patients were common, so I informed my boss several times in person and email. Had an attitude with every other department we worked with and never informed nurses that we were moving their patients. Big no-no when meds and vital signs need to be done. One day she had abandoned a patient in the ER waiting room when they were waiting for a ride home and told no one, so security had found a patient just sitting alone for 15 to 30 minutes without supervision. It took this and a year of recorded evidence for this person to finally get fired. When that happened, it's like a dark cloud lifted and a lot of people were relieved. Oh, and she tried to get various employees around the facility to sign a form to argue against her case. One person signed. Worked with a girl who would sometimes just lay in the floor and play on her phone. She would routinely flip out about something her boyfriend did and just start screaming curse words, sometimes in front of customers. She was eventually fired for smoking weed while on the clock. I had a manager once who dumped trash on my desk my third day there. She said it was to remind me that taking out the trash was part of my job description. It wasn't. I was a research assistant at a mortgage firm. Not necessarily a co-worker, but my old supervisor literally told me not to think, even if it's wrong, that I do things her way, and not to ask questions because I should already know what to do. I had just gotten the position. Hired a cook on a good recommendation. He was just fine the first 2 weeks. Then I noticed food going missing. Then supplies started going missing. Then a customer told me that he had been adding auto 30% tips his food purchases. When I looked at the books, I saw that he had been adding 30% tips to all the credit card sales. And the cash rings were off from what should have been sold. I fired him that day. The next day he came in and apologized. Said he was on drugs and was going to rehab. I wished him well. The next day he tried to break in after close and was caught. Idiot. This is about 15 years ago, but the office I worked in instituted a scent-free policy. One woman, who was already insufferable, was so offended by it that she snuck in her perfume collection. She'd walk down the halls and spray perfume into empty offices or cubicles when no one was looking or before everyone arrived in the morning. This went on for well over a month or two and we had no idea who was responsible. My co-workers and I started referring to this mysterious person as the Chanel Bandit. She was finally caught on camera in the act. She'd left for 3 weeks vacation and was unaware that we had installed cameras after a break-in. Some of us already suspected her, as the Chanel Bandit mysteriously stopped spraying while she was away. She quit right after she was caught. None of us were sad to see that cedar-scented psycho leave. I've worked a lot of factories, but one I worked at was mainly for felons. They pay you complete shit and work you so hard it tears you body and mind up. I just graduated high school and it was my second factory, so I didn't know any better. One guy I work with, we nicknamed Big Matt since we already had another Matt. Well, Big Matt was a big fan of crystal and steroids, so the dude was absolutely jacked, but this 35 years still lived with his mom. He said it had to do with him being a kid and walking and her being raped, and ever since then he never wanted to leave her alone. At the time I thought, wow, that would explain the substance abuse. He just wants to be strong to protect. Fucking idiot. 2 months later, Big Matt and 2 co-workers didn't show up, so I asked the supervisor what happened, but he didn't know either. Next day one of the co-workers came in and told us that all 3 had been arrested because after buying an O of weed, Big Matt's mom called the cops on them. So before the cops showed up, Big Matt, A 6-foot-some-odd-inch buff meth head beat his mother within an inch of her life for calling the cops on him. Next day I looked him up, and sure enough he was booked in a local prison. Suppose that has to be the worst coworker out of all the ones I faced. This guy named Daniel I used to work with at McDonald's in high school. He let everyone know he worked out and enjoyed being on the football team. He had this thing about taking 5 shits a day. He would walk by on his way back from the toilet, chest out, shoulders back and triumphantly announce that's shit number 3, fucking Daniel. I worked with a guy that regularly Googled everyone we worked with. He knew information about the apartment we had just sold and told everyone at our department meeting how much we sold for. His name was Dan. Dan was 37 working at a dead-end job as a lab specimen processor in a windowless room for 9 hours a day. He ate only Burger King, but without the lettuce because that's rabbit food. He drank literally a gallon of Mountain Dew a day, and was confused as to why people were horrified by that. There's water in it, he would say. Apparently if he ate corn he would vomit and have to go to the hospital. He would tell me he firmly believed that man and dinosaur roamed the earth at the same time, along with many other theories that came from his gut. One day we got into a political argument before the 2016 election where he said if Bernie Sanders is elected president, there will be a civil war, and I will not hesitate to kill you and your family. Dan was fired. I got out of there as soon as I could. Don't be like Dan.